Now, you can say it.
Hi, Brother Bill.
When it turns red, it's recording. So we're looking at Leviticus 18 tonight. And we're going to start out in verse 1 and go through 5. I'll read that. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do. Neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. Ye shall do my judgments, and keep my ordinances, to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. One of the things you're going to see tonight in this chapter, how many times I am the Lord is there. And that's, in the Hebrew, that's Yahweh. Is that too bright on you?
Yeah.
Well, it helps light for the camera.
Okay.
So, because it's awful dark in here. You can wear your sunglasses. But yeah, I tried to turn on lights so they can see a little better. But it's just reaffirming to the Israelites, as they have come out of 400 years of Egypt being there. Just think, 300 years, not even 300 years, America's been here. I don't know what happened 100 years ago, let alone, see how much has changed in just 100 years. So we're in 2023. 1923, my dad was a year old. And he's told me a lot of stuff that happened in those, because he went through the Depression and all that stuff. It's just miles apart from where we are today. We got cars and jets and everything like that, and they were just on the beginning. He told me that they had an old truck that it would run, but they'd have to run it in reverse to go uphill, because it didn't have enough power to go uphill forwards. It was the way it was
a lot of them
clocked down.
A lot of them had
the rear end
centrifugal. I mean, like you noticed, the fuel pumps were always. Tanks were right there.
It's up above.
Water would run, the gas would run down to the.
Yep. I mean, it's just incredible how far we've gone, even in 20 years. We had cell phones 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and the cell phones we had was like that big.
Brother Randy had one that was like a brick.
It was a brick. I had one as a bag phone when I was going out in the field back in 93 and 94. Before that, we had radios. We had one CB radios, but it's two-way radios that we would communicate back and forth. And they'd reach 50 miles. They put up a big old tower at the office, and then you could reach everywhere out there. But it's changed so much just in that amount of time. But we have changed it. The country has changed in that amount of time. When they voted, and I will bring it up, coming up in March, I think it's the second week in March, they're going to be voting on recreational marijuana. So I encourage you to get out and vote. I don't know what it's going to be when they voted for the medicinal marijuana. I just like, it ain't going to pass. Man. Yesterday was school boards. Most of the schools had.
Who won that?
Kessler won it for Owasso. I don't know where you're at, but the Owasso school system was voting. They had a seat that was being open. He had to get voted back in. But there was 2 other people on it. And each one of the school districts had it. Some of them had some bonds, school bonds that you had to vote on. We didn't. But some of the other school systems did. So as we go forward, some of the things that I thought would never happen here in Oklahoma. You know, I would never have thought that the medical marijuana would pass. And it was what they had some kind of vote on it a year or two ahead of it. It was just boom, no way it's going through.
Well, speaking of that, you know, I'm sorry to say this, but Christians don't get out there and vote like they should.
No, they don't.
And you know, that's a shame.
And that's why I'm encouraging you to vote. It's your option of what you want to do is to vote. And you can't complain about it.
If you don't vote,
you can complain about it, but it's no good, because if you didn't vote, then you didn't have a say in it. No matter what it is. But that's the only way, and it doesn't hurt if you want to, you know, I don't think it hurts to go out and campaign, as long as you've done your due diligence and you know what the person stands for, and if they've got a relationship with you, you may know them from way back or whatever. That's okay, because we need to get people in office that has the moral values that we expect.
Yes.
And it's just, you know, today we don't have a clue. Now, everybody could always go off on a tangent. You think they're one way and they could go another. That happens. But that's why they get voted again. They don't get a lifetime term. So, you know, if it changes, it changes. Anyway, what God's trying to tell the people, setting them up after this 400 years of being ingrained in the Egyptian history, the Egyptian gods, the Egyptian idols, is don't do that anymore. So he says, don't do what the Egyptians did. And you're going into the land of Canaan, don't do what they do. You do what I told you. What has he told them? Gave them the 10 Commandments. He gave them all these laws and sacrifices and what to do and what not to do, all these things we've been going through. He's setting them apart as a separate people to stand out. So they don't look like, I mean, the way they operate, it doesn't look like the normal whatever everybody else is doing.
You know, we can apply that today.
Exactly.
If you're a Christian, you are not supposed to be out there doing stuff that other people that, you know, are doing. You've got a higher responsibility as a Christian.
That's right.
You can't just go with the flow, so to speak.
Now, what a lot of people get upset with, well, this is the Old Testament. That don't apply today. No, I beg to differ. The laws are still in place. And it talks about that as you go through, and we'll hit upon it off and on, back and forth. But it just reinforces it here down below in Romans 6 and Galatians 5. Paul hits upon it hard, that these things, God was sent, or Jesus was sent by God down here to what? Fulfill the law.
Yes.
Okay? That doesn't mean he's going to do away with it. He says, I'm not going to do away with it.
No.
I'm here to fulfill the law. We look at the law as like it's so constricting that you can't do nothing. But what I view the law is, it's like the gutters on the street, the curbs on the street. It helps keep that car in the street and out of your yard. It's there. When you hit it, you know you've done something wrong and you pull back. Or those barriers on the highway. You know, you've got the barriers. It's kind of like at the cart in the playgrounds when you have the go-karts and the kids get in and drive them. They got bumpers on each side. You know, boom, boom. They can't get off the road. The road's there. That's what the law is for. But what Jesus came to do was to place that law in our hearts. And so we can study this, and it's still valid, because these laws should be our guiding principles through all of our lives.
There in the leaflet, it says, these are the words of God, and as such they have immensely more authority than the words, opinions, theories, desires, feelings, longings, and wishes any person or persons.
Mm-hmm. Today's society is, if it feels good, do it. Whatever it is. And that goes for what was talked about tonight. It's going to be on sex a lot. But that applies to anything. Like we was talking about the marijuana, if they want to be high all the time, they can claim that they've got a problem. Now, some people do have problems, and yeah, it does help it, but we don't know what else it messes up. You know, they can't function, pretty much. Know for a fact some people that do that, and that's all, you know, they really can't function. They're just seem like high all the time because they quote, or, you know, and I'm not belaboring anybody's pain or anything, but they use that for a purpose, but they do it too much. They overuse it. And that's part of it. We have to, whatever we do, you can do that with medicine too. There's pain medications and other, you know, alcohol, anything like that. You can use it. It can be for good, help you through sickness or something like that, or you can overuse it. So.
Well, today's time, so many people that want to do anything and everything, they'll still want to holler, God loves me and He made me this way.
Right.
No, God didn't. The Word doesn't say that He made you that way.
Right.
But the same as God's telling them He's their God.
Right.
Not any whim or whatever of the Canaanites. If they had a half a dozen gods, they still need to be dependent on Him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way with us in today's time. I mean, we know the true God, and we follow the true God, not just because somebody wants to twist it a little bit to justify what they're doing out there.
Right. Right.
It can't happen.
It's ultimately on Egypt, Pharaoh was their God. I mean, they looked to him to guide them. You know, whatever Pharaoh said, it goes. Now, they had other gods, you know, like we said before, for fertility, for growing the land, for doing all these things. All the peoples do that because it seemed like that's what was being pushed from that realm. Whatever you want to do, there's a God for that. You need to pray for it, you know, and get that over. So whether it be Egypt, whether it be Rome, whether it be Greek, whether it be whatever it is, he's telling them it's a true monotheism. One God, and He's going to tell you what to do, and this is the way it needs to be done. You can't do it any other way. If you do, you're not doing what he basically tells them right there at the end, if you shall do it, you're going to live. Okay? Now, we haven't really got into part of it because it really hasn't mentioned it yet, the sexuality, but it's going to in just a few minutes. Jesus, there's a whole bunch of commentary on this, and this is a long lesson. It's not very many verses, so you can go through and read some of this to your own extent when you want to get there, but there's a lot of scriptures and a lot of things that's in here that will help for that. Gosh, we go over to page 4 before we even get to the next page 5 before we even get to the next verses. Brother Epson, you'll read 6 through 9.
It says, none of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him, to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. The nakedness of thy father or the nakedness of thy mother shalt thou not uncover. She is thy mother, and thou shalt not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of thy father's wife shall not be uncovered. It is thy father's nakedness. And the nakedness of thy sister, the daughter of thy father or the daughter of thy mother, whether she be born at home or born abroad, even their nakedness shall not uncover.
Okay. Now this is approximately Abraham was about 2000 BC, I think. So this is about 1600 years before Christ. So you've had about 2,400 years of history up until that time. So before that, this was not instituted for a particular reason. Because you go back, Adam and Eve, you had two people. Who did Cain marry? Who did Seth marry after the fact? They had to have married either a sister or one of the siblings, may have been a niece or a nephew or something like that afterwards. So they married their near kin. Well, back then, Adam and Eve was perfect. God created them in the very beginning. He said that he created man and saw that it was good. That means that everything, they were the perfect beings. Those two, the first individual, Adam, and then Eve was taken out of Adam. So he told them to reproduce after your kind and go on, and they did. Okay? Up until that time, but because of the sin, they started getting corrupted. The people started going their own way. Noah, when him and his family was there, it was just 8 people. Noah, his wife, and his 3 sons and their wives. That's all that was saved on the earth. Everybody else was wiped out. They had sons and daughters as they went on, but there's going to be some intermarrying. Japheth's grandson may have married Seth or one of the others' granddaughter. There's going to be some intermarrying because there had to be at a particular time. Now we get to Moses' time, and he said, look, you can't do any of that.
Is when it says nakedness, are they talking sexual?
Sexuality.
Not just
You
seeing
can't have
somebody without any clothes.
Right. That's a nice way. It's a King James version. Okay, and King James didn't want to put it out there, but you can't have sexual intercourse with them. And he's saying because you can't do it with your mother, and what he's talking about is, of course, your mother, who would want to anyway, but if it was his stepmother, if he had married somebody else, it's still your nakedness of your father. It's like you're uncovering him. Very beginning, God created man and woman, and they were naked. And it was okay. But then sin entered in. And once sin entered in, what did God say? I don't know where you at. And the next thing, as soon as they saw that they had sinned, then they tried to put clothes on. They put them fig leaves on. God said, that's not going to work. Those are going to rot off in a few days. So to protect that, because of the pride that they had, that they wanted to be like God, and the lust that they had, and all the different vices that was in there, God said, you need to be covered. And he gave them the coverings. So that's where they get that. You can't uncover their nakedness. If you're uncovering your nakedness, you're seeing them naked, and the impulses will get up on you if you're not careful. So that's what he's telling them. You can't look upon the nakedness of your father or your mother or your sister or your wife, your father's wife, or the daughter of your father, or even the daughter of your mother. So it's saying no incest, nothing in your family. You got to remember, too, this time period. They all lived in the same house, pretty much. Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa may have still lived there. Your aunt and uncle may have lived with you. All these, and people are right there. It took an effort to not be naked in front of them. You had to go to the other part of the house or whatever to sleep, and it's a little different than us. They didn't have a quote bathroom. They didn't change their clothes every day. They didn't have, I don't know how they're living, but most of the time they just slept in the clothes they had on. If it was a hot day, they may have changed once a week, or I don't know, every once in a while. Dad used to say, man, they, run around all week. In summer, same clothes. They just get dirty. They only had a couple pairs of jeans and a couple pairs of shirts, and most of the time they didn't have any socks or shoes. They said they just ran around barefooted most of the time. And so it's one of those things. I can remember as a kid trying to get out of the bath, Oh, I don't need a bath. Oh, you out there sweating all day. You need to get in there and get a bath. I don't need no bath. It's one of those things, So, but this is what you shall not approach anyone who is near kin to you, anyone that's close. And that today, that even follows through today. You're not supposed to marry anybody legally. I don't think you could. I don't know if you have to go, what is it, second cousin, something like that?
I think it's, the third.
Third generation down, something like that. Because they know today that messes people up. They started to see that a lot in the Dark Ages, where the kings would marry and have kids and go marry one of the kids or whatever. There was a lot of problems with those kids because they, the genes started mutating and started becoming, something that shouldn't be. So that's another reason why God put this into place. He wants us, and he told them to separate, when they first told them, go out and populate the earth with Noah and all his group. But, Nimrod wanted to keep everybody together there in Babel and have the Tower of Babel and build it up to the sky. God had told them to go out and populate the earth. They was just doing the opposite of what God wanted to do. So that's why he scattered them. He changed their languages around, and that's why they started moving out, because they couldn't understand one another. And it kind of moved it away. He pushed it in a certain direction that he wanted to go. God did. So these are, and it says, Leviticus 18 defines specific boundaries for the family. This instruction is critical if the promise that Abraham was to be the ancestor of a great and mighty nation was to be fulfilled. A nation cannot exist if the family unit is not well defined, for the family is the foundation of society. And doing some of the genealogy of my family, it's like some of the things, he married, my grandpa and his cousin married sisters. Okay? So that it wasn't their sisters, but it was another family's sisters. Well, that's okay. That's fine. But that makes close interrelations between them. Because not only are one of them a cousin, but also an aunt. The way it be.
I have two uncles and one aunt, and they married two sisters and a brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kid them about them being double cousins.
Double cousins, that's right. And that's
it was more popular a generation or two ago.
Well,
that two in one family would marry two in another
sure.
family.
You're right there. You didn't have a vehicle to go very far. You had to walk or take a horse or whatever, and you lived right in the same community. That's one of the things that they teach us in genealogy. Look back in the census and see where people was, and then check the previous census and see who the neighbors are to see if it's the same person. Because that way you can confirm, that was Uncle Joe, and it's still Uncle Joe, and so was his neighbor, and so was this neighbor in the same 10-year space. So it's the same people. Because a lot of people have the same names, especially with it's very common name, Smith or something like that. There's a whole bunch of them. So you don't know if it's Joe Smith, Jim Smith, Jay Smith, or all these different ones. But it was more popular. Nowadays, people are marrying people all over the world. They've got the Ukrainian brides and everything from here to there. But back then, all the way back to Moses' time, they were telling them, don't get any closer to your kin. It says always goes all the way back to the relationship in Genesis when he made one flesh, okay, with Adam and Eve. And it says right here, this phrase used 17 times in this chapter to uncover his nakedness is a polite way to speak of sexual activity. The emphasis is not so much on nudity, but on sexual activity. However, the term to uncover nakedness is broad enough to include the idea of inappropriate activity. It would also include molestation and inappropriate fondling. So anything like that, you just have to, it's your family. And it's your family. That's what you have to, you don't do that. That's what God's telling. Let's see. Let's go on to 10. Why don't you read about 10 through 14? Read about half of it, Iris, 10 through 14.
The nakedness of thy son's daughter, or of thy daughter's daughter, even their nakedness thou shalt not uncover, for theirs is their own nakedness. The nakedness of thy father's wife's daughter, begotten of thy father, she is thy sister. Thou shalt not uncover her nakedness. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy father's sister. She is thy father's near kinswoman. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy mother's sister, for she is thy mother's near kinswoman.
Okay, Bertha, you want to read the 14 through 18?
Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy father's brother. Thou shalt not approach his wife. She is thine aunt. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy daughter-in-law. She is the son's wife. Thou shalt not uncover her nakedness. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter. Neither shalt thou take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are her near kinwoman. It is wickedness. Neither shalt thou take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness beside the other in her lifetime.
Okay, all these, as we go down through, and on the next page you can see the way it goes through. Grandparents and grandchildren by blood or marriage, uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, parents, spouses of their children, siblings, spouses of their siblings, other siblings, the children of a spouse, the sibling of a spouse. All these different family members, at the particular time, it was forbidden for them to marry, forbidden to them to have relationship. And the main thing is they would probably live together. So that's why he's saying. Now, what did he say at the very beginning? Don't do like they did in Egypt. Don't do like they're going to do in Canaan. They did these things.
Yeah.
They were doing these things. And he's trying to tell them, don't do that. You're not, because it's not even it's offending God, but it's also, if like a brother's daughter, you're offending your brother then. Okay, you're hurting your brother or whomever it should be. If you go forward and it's outside of the family, then okay, you can marry. You can go outside of the family and you marry, and it's fine. It's outside the tribes. That's why their particular tribe or their particular group of tribe, their family, even though, back all the way to the 12 tribes, they were all from one set, but it has spread down. If you go through and look, I'm made up of 50% from my mom and 50% from my dad. But my grandparents, I'm made up of 25% of my mom's dad, 25% of my mom's mom, 25% of dad's dad, 25% of dad's mom. And then go to great grandparents, and it's down to 12.5% for each one, because you got different. As you see, that's mellowing it out to where if one of those, I'll just use it like this, if one of those was an Indian and you're trying to get a Cherokee card or a card, you know, great grandfather, you could go back, I think one more, I think they go down to 6% or something like that. I don't know what it is now, but
Mine is Cherokee, yes.
so they'll look back that far to see, but that's one great grandparent for everybody else's white, if you want to say it that way. So that's really diluted. And that's what it's saying, that as the body makes new people, that's diluted enough that it's not gonna hurt. That's what God's plan was. But even that is to go outside of the family. It's to go further than that in order not to develop these problems that we have. What you laughing at?
Oh, I was just thinking of a guy was talking, it's a jokester, and he was talking about they lived in this small town.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was only about 400 people or something. He got a a message computer thing or something, said, send us $100 or something like that, and we give you a list of 900 to, nice, And the guy said, no, you can't. He said, then he started talking about his his best friend, and he began to date this girl that was his cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, that's your cousin? And he said, well, we have a lot of things in common. He said, yeah, like uncles.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that's, the world is like that today.
Well, we talk about that, but when Daniel was young, he said, we're going to have to put him out of state because we're related to so many people in here, that it's going to be hard not to get it. And we were going to a funeral on my wife's side, Darla's side, and Mom and Dad happened to go with us for whatever reason, I don't remember. But she met one of the ladies that was related to her on that side. And I'm like, man, it's a small world, because it's just, even though we live in these towns, it's still a very small world.
It is.
Verse 19 says, also, let me go to Janice. Will you read that, Janet?
Also, thou shalt not approach unto a woman to uncover her nakedness, as long as she is put apart for her uncleanness. You want me to keep going?
No, that's okay. We'll talk about this just a second. And we go back to, because in the laws, what we studied a few weeks ago, that when a woman has her time of the month, she's unclean for a particular time. And that's what this means here, whether you're man or woman or not, because it makes her unclean. She is unclean, and it'll make the man unclean. And it's one of those things too. It says there's no specific mention of a marriage relationship in this verse, but a woman includes a wife, but goes beyond the marriage relationship in this marriage. This was a command for sexual restraint and honor, even within a marriage relationship. That's the way their viewpoint is. So it may seem strange, but it's an honoring of that time for the woman. She needs to be set aside for that particular time to be cleansed. Okay, go ahead and read 20 if you want to, Harold.
Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife, to defile thyself with her.
Okay? Now we're starting to get into the different parts. This all goes back to the Ten Commandments. It's your neighbor's wife. You're violating that marriage contract that you've signed with your wife. God has seen it. It says to lie carnally is a polite way to speak of sexual intercourse or activity. It's to violate that marriage bond. God's intentions for sexual expression is within the marriage. Outside of that is breaking that covenant. Do not fulfill this intention. They go against God's design. Here again it says it's an echo of the seventh commandment, Exodus 20 and 14. The act itself is condemned, and there's no justification allowed under the ways people often seek to justify adultery. It's just saying no, you shouldn't do that. So even in the neighborhoods, now if you're going to marry a person or whatever, and it happens to be your neighbor, that would be fine. You marry them and you go on about your business and you make your own family, but you can't have another man's wife. This is clear. This is just like David.
Well, I was going to say, well, how come so many broke that law?
They just did because they get caught up in that feeling. They want to, they want it.
I believe it's part of the curse.
It is.
Because God made us, okay, and He put that act in marriage to be something that you share with no one else. It's a oneness relationship, okay, but because that is such a strong urge, okay, and something that, well, I mean, when you use it to put, to sell cherry bomb, mufflers and or you put, today sex drives everything.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Again, I think I may mention my mother's about 15 years old, so that'd have been about 1943, something like that, 42. My grandmother was talking to her and she said, honey, I probably won't see it, but you'll see a day when they're walking, you might see a day when they're walking naked in the streets. And again, and when we get to that place under the law, okay, you had to physically have sex. And then people say, well, it's under the law. Okay, come under the New Testament. It's even worse. I mean, not worse, but it's even stricter.
Yeah.
You can't even look up on the opposite sex and say, try to have sex with them in their mind.
Right.
But again, that is part that we have to, we're made up beings, okay? And we have urges. And because of sin, okay, those urges exist. And we have to bring them under subjection.
Right. I think in David's case, his wife, Michal at the time, I think it was, he couldn't have any kids. They hadn't had any children up to then. And he should have been in war, but he wasn't with his men. He had sent his men out. And he was out, it was hot, so he was out that evening on his deck, and he saw Bathsheba lived next door to him, out taking a bath. Well, he should have turned his back away right then, but he didn't.
But didn't David also have a third wife?
Oh yeah, later on, yeah. He had additional ones.
And then Solomon.
Abigail, and then Solomon had 300 wives and 700 concubines.
Back in the wing.
Yeah, concubines. So, I think, especially for them, but us too, like I said, David, she's not going to be any good. I'm king. I ought to be able to do what I want. And Solomon the same way. Solomon did it because he wanted to try to make unions with other countries, so he'd marry, the daughter of that country or whatever, of the king of that country. But that's not, okay, they still make the arrangement, but they don't need to solemnize it with the marriage. But that's what they did. That's the way they sold it to themselves.
But it shows the degradation that the world had gotten to by the time Christ came.
Mm-hmm.
It did get a little better gradually, okay, but still, like we say, sometimes we read about David, and I think sometimes David, but then what Paul was talking about, that he was a man after God's own heart.
Right.
Again, man, wow.
he missed the mark quite a bit,
Yes.
but he still was able, his heart was malleable to God.
Well, when Nathan came to him and told him the story, you know,
He
and then Nathan said, "It's you."
Yeah.
And then you read the 51st Psalm, and it tells you David began to repent. And he suffered for that for the rest of his life.
Oh yeah, he suffered. His child died, but then later on he
His
suffered.
kin, I mean,
Yeah.
and again, you talk about the different wives, the different children that brought all kinds of
trouble, strife,
problems in the family. And, you know, there was Absalom, you know, one of their brothers raped his sister, and then he ended up killing him. And it just, it shows the depth that sin can take us.
Right.
Well, you know, Reuben had already laid with his father's
Right, concubine.
concubine, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
Japheth or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure that the tribe of Reuben and the other tribes of Israel at that time already knew about that.
Sure.
So, I mean, God had to wean them off of it or whatever, that they didn't just fall after any lust or whatever out there.
Right. It was pushing them forwards, trying to reestablish what Abraham had established.
Yeah.
And you say, well, Abraham had two wives.
Yes.
But that wasn't God's purpose. God didn't stick him with, you know, Hagar.
And look at the problems.
I know it caused problems. It caused two different nations.
Still today,
Yeah.
we've got those
Yeah.
problems.
Right.
Well, you know, during Abraham's time and on into Jacob, the wives part of the time gave them their handmaid
Sure.
or whatever.
Sure.
And
Especially
he
if
understands you don't own them people to get to give them away like that.
Right. Well, that at that time, that was, they wanted to have children. If they couldn't have children, it was, you know, a mark against them that they weren't fruitful and they wasn't doing what God told them to do. Well, they just didn't have patience. Sometimes, at least, Sarah did. Verse 21 says, and thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Now this Molech is a god that they would sacrifice their children through. They would burn their children up through them. If they would have, you know, we have our abortion today, this is the same thing back then. They said, as I was going through here, you can read through it, but that they'd have a statue of it, and they'd heat the statue up till it was almost red hot, and then they'd put the baby on the arms of the statue and let the baby just burn out.
Yeah.
You know, that was sacrificing their children to them. And that's why it says, no wonder the Bible identifies Molech with the demonic, because that's exactly right. They are very much
You
a part
know,
of that.
you think, and I know we've talked about it, how can people do, you know, like my first great grandbaby, she only weighed 3 pounds 4 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a real small, and it would have been okay just a few hours before she was born to abort her.
Yeah.
And then we say, how can people do that? How could those people back then take a little baby and put it in a, and, you know, even now, some states have talked about a 28-day, after, you know, 1 month, 28 day, if you decide you don't want the baby, you can abort that baby in 28 days. And you think, how in the world? But it happens. It's
Right.
happening today.
It is.
As we have turned away from God, our nation has been overtaken with other gods that came in.
It's, I hate to say it, but it's like them. They go into a country, and then all these invading armies come through, and they're not conquering, but they are, because they're starting to institute their laws and their things that they do, and it's just, I mean, it's happening to us today.
One thing is, you can remember though, in all of these, all down through, God's always had a remnant.
He has.
And this last remnant He's going to take away His church.
Mm-hmm. One thing I found interesting, and I've read it, but it's good to kind of summarize it here. One of the greatest, it's at the top of page 11, one of the greatest crimes of the northern tribes of Israel was their worship of Molech. leading to the Assyrian captivity. In 2 Kings, it tells us that. King Manasseh of Judah gave his son to Moloch. He was one of the first kings of Judah. Up until the days of King Josiah of Judah, Moloch worship continued because Josiah, he destroyed a place of worship to that idol. He put an end to it for Judah. But I'm not saying that all of it happened, but he got rid of the idol. So it's one of those things that was one specific thing that God pushed forward. Verse 22, Brother Epperson.
Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination.
Pretty plain.
Pretty plain.
Pretty plain.
I was listening to a deal, and he's a pastor, okay, we use that word loosely. And their church is talking about homosexual Christians, in other words, gay Christians, how they love the Lord. They had one come on, he talked about a relationship with Jesus Christ and all of this, and then they would go back and hear the preacher and say, well, I know what it says in Leviticus, about, the abomination. But, and then I just...
There's no buts. Yeah.
No.
There's no buts.
Get back there, thus saith the Lord God.
It seems like because it's the Old Testament, they just turn it off. And the thing that they don't understand, if you go through the Jewish people, what was set forth in the first 5 books of the Bible and all down through, and those Pharisees and all those things, they were adamant against these laws. So in the New Testament, they don't have to tell all this stuff. It's in the Old Testament. They knew it. So that's why a lot of things, in my opinion, is not touched upon on the New Testament by Jesus. Okay? That's what I'm saying. That's what they get. Well, Jesus never said anything about it, against it. Well, I beg to differ. He did. But he did it through Paul. Paul told them. And some of the others down through there. And even Jesus told them in some places that, it's just not right.
It may not have specifically singled it out, but Jesus did tell him it was wrong too, because he told him he didn't come to do away with the law.
That's right.
He come to fulfill it.
Fulfill the law.
So in that, he did tell him.
He did. That's what I'm saying. That they take it that they want to see the exact wording.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to read the whole thing. I'm sorry. You can't take bits and pieces out of it.
They want to do it that way.
Yeah. They'll take it. Well, David loved Jonathan. Yeah, he did. But he didn't love him like a woman. He loved him like a brother. He's like one of those things. It's just, anyway, we can go on and on about it, but that's not it goes through, gives you several passages here, Leviticus, and Paul, it talks with the 1 Corinthians. It also talks about it in Revelation. So it tells us there that it's an abomination. Back in Romans again, which speaks about lesbianism. Judges and Genesis talks about it. When Lot was in the Sodom and Gomorrah, and they wanted to come and said, they saw 2 guys coming in the house, send them out. We want to have our way with them. God's speaking against it. So they just don't want to see what they want to do. They want to be able to do whatever they want.
Now they say it's okay, but used to they said alternate lifestyle, alternative lifestyle.
Yeah.
They didn't, but now and over years, Dave said, that we don't tolerate that, but they don't want toleration, they want acceptance.
Yes. Now the people, God still loves everybody.
Yes, amen.
God still loved the people of Israel, Judah, and all the Gentiles. But he's got to do what he says to do. And he tells them not to do it. It's a sin. And he turns his back on them. Not that he doesn't love them, but he can't look upon sin. And that's what we have to, the thing that they push today, when you they call it homophobe and all that. It's like, I don't hate you. I'm not going to be doing what you're doing, but I can't say that you're okay doing it. That's just, it's me.
They have a choice.
They have a choice.
God gives them a choice.
They think they're born that way.
And
And
if
that's
they
not
choose
right.
that, then God has, I mean, he's not mocked.
Right.
And
Right.
he will send them to hell if they don't confess and ask for forgiveness and turn from it.
And it goes through, this is kind of some interesting data in 2018. It's a little bit dated from today, but it says United States National Health Information Survey, 97.6% of adults identified as heterosexual or straight. 1.6% identified as gay or lesbian. 0.8% identified as bisexual. Now, in the previous 4 to 4.5 years since then, I bet it's gone up because more people come in. But that's 2%, 2 to 3% of the population that's
And
driving.
they are the ones out there raising Cain.
That's right.
To get, all those laws passed and everything.
So we go on to 23. Iris?
Neither shalt thou lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith, neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereto. It is confusion.
Okay. You think that was bad?
And these things had to be happening.
It had to be happening.
Because if it wasn't happening, he wouldn't need to cover it.
There was a god, in the next page it says that they're gods of Ugarit. I've never heard of that before, but this was their example. He led their devotees in this sin. Okay? So here again, he's telling them, don't do like the people around you do. And I don't know where these people lived or anything, but it had to be happening in Egypt. It had to be happening in Canaan around all the people who was there. It's a perversion. That's what it is. God didn't create that.
Well, it was a few months ago that I heard on one of the news shows, and I feel pretty confident it was just being facetious in the way that it was said. But a man was trying to get permission to marry a dog.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But people are actually doing that now.
I know. They are. They're doing things like that, and it's just crazy. Okay, 24 through 30. We're going to finish this up. I want to read a couple of those verses, Bertha. 24, 25, and 26. What I can.
Oh.
Page 50.
Defile not ye yourself in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled which I cast out before you, and in the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants.
The rest of it says, Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled, that the land spew not you out also when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore shall ye keep mine ordinance, that ye commit none of these abominable customs which were committed before you, and that ye defile not yourselves. Therein I am the Lord your God. It finishes up. All these things, it's just a he mentioned all these because all the nations around them was doing it, and they didn't want to get caught up in it. And it's we've seen it over and over and over again. Even though Lot lived in the city, he didn't get caught up in it, but he eventually did because the angels that was there, they wanted to, the men of the town wanted to have sex with them as they came in. It's just, man is so wicked. A lot of people today, they think, oh, there's good in man. Well, I hope so, but I think there's a lot not, because it's just one of those things that today's society.
Just like this, the Super Bowl, the two commercials they had on
Oh yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
They received all. I mean, the world got.
They got upset with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it wasn't saying, some people got upset and didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
And said, well, you didn't teach anything about God or anything. He said, well, he gets us. It was the terminology they said. He gets us between the strife and all this stuff. And it basically said Jesus understands. And I know, some people said, well, that's not getting the word out. There was 1 billion people watching that may have never ever heard of Jesus. And it got out to them through that commercial, or 2 commercials. So
in verse 28 and 29, that the land spew not you out also when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you.
Yeah.
For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them, shall be cut off from among their people. So what were they going to do?
As far as
If they committed these things, what was the
they
consequence?
said, you're not a part of us anymore. They're out.
They would make them outcasts.
They would make them outcasts. And what he's meaning, the country spewed them out. That's just the country didn't actually spew them out, but God did. God sent the Israelites in, and in a lot of the cases, he said, kill them all. Because even if you keep a child, that child will remember and will have those customs and go back to it. And a lot of times that's what they did. They killed everything except the beasts, the animals that they could use and farm. And the ones that they didn't do that, when God told them to do it, it led them astray later on. Made problems later on.
So the Israelites, when God laid these laws down to them, then if somebody transgressed these laws, they were sent out away from the Israel
They were no longer a part of Israel.
Well, right here in this case, God commanded that Israel, there should be a strong sense of social disapproval,
right,
amounting to exile toward those who broke these laws of sexual immorality. And I love this part. They are family-killing sins, therefore civilization killing sins. In other words, these things, what they were doing, the incest, all these things killed families. And then definitely homosexuality does. If everybody truly went homosexual tomorrow,
you wouldn't have any.
Wouldn't have no more offspring.
After a few, just a few. Well, they don't have any reproducing. They would go get somebody else's, but after that, it just wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have anybody.
Well, we're in a mess.
We are.
A big mess.
That's the days of Noah.
Yep.
Well, the ones that were cast out as part of the community or whatever, was there any recourse that they could go and do the sin offerings and one thing to become back in to that?
There are different places where they said if this happens, it is, and we see that in David. David went back and he pleaded to God. He had a repentant heart. So God saw that and he allowed that to happen. What he did, I don't know exactly, but he paid for it. His child died.
Yeah.
He still got to marry Bathsheba. It wasn't what God wanted, but it still happened. So yes, there are some things that God allows, and God's always going to allow a way back, a pathway back for anybody that truly wants to come back to Him. If they're just trying to get, accepted, no, without repentance, that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, you can go down, you can ask for forgiveness on it. You go down to the altar, but if you get up and go home doing the same thing,
Yeah.
Either your heart wasn't in the right spot when you were asking for the forgiveness, or you're going right back to sin.
Yeah, you truly were. You were forget the different terms now. You have repentance.
Godly sorrow worketh repentance. We're sorry you got caught, but not.
Yeah, you're sorry you got caught, but then you got to have regeneration that changes you.
Yeah.
That changes that being. And we always talked about in, youth camp, oh yeah, it took 3 or 4 summers before I finally got through, They
Well,
go
I'm
home
sure
and,
we've all
yeah.
been around people that say, well, I asked God for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, but you're still going right back to it.
Yeah, you got to follow him then.
Well, he said, repent ye therefore and
Be converted.
Yes.
That word there literally means turn and go the other direction.
Yep.
They always hear, God will always forgive you. So they use that.
There are some
God's always gonna forgive you no matter what.
There are some laws that the Israelites had that, when they would stone when they get caught, they would stone them. So, there's no coming back from that if they got, but God still, made it available to people. That may not have been his intention on some places. They took it further than what they needed to take.
Yeah.
Because it's 10 commandments, and 613 laws and precepts and all that was added to that 10 commandments. And Jesus reduced all that down to 2. Now,
Well, when you study them, those 2 cover it all.
it covered all. It's not saying it did away with them. It just made it easier for you to keep track of. You have to keep track of love God and love your neighbor.
Well, that's how come I think Peter said all scripture is given by the inspiration of God and profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, and instruction is righteous, that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped. Like you said, when Jesus was doing all the talk, and these people already knew that, because the only thing